it's Brian from London Real. This week we have professional mixed martial artist Pete Irving on the show. He talks about sparring with Anderson Silva in Brazil, how he deals with a loss, and some good advice for young guys trying to get into mixed martial arts. Check it out.
Welcome to London, the city we come from. London town and we go radiated town now. We go party all night long.
This is London Real. I'm your host, Brian Rose. I'm experiencing a wonderful post-ayahuasca glow. Mr. Nick Gabriel is back from his conquests in the Mediterranean. And joining us today is Mr. Pete Irving, who's a mixed martial arts fighter with a record of, I've beat up a lot more guys than you have.
Is that a polite way of saying he's lost a few?
No, by no means. Welcome, Pete.
Welcome.
You know, thing.
Thank you.
The thing I like about you, Pete, is that no one would ever think you're a fighter. You know?
Jesus, dude, did that ayahuasca kick in the comedy gene or something, man?
Or the wannabe comedy gene? I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, menacing tattoos, pearly white teeth. Can you tell us about your teeth and your art?
It's a funny thing. I know what you're saying. I've sort of become the image of what I do, and I sometimes wake up in the morning and I look in the mirror and I go, who's this guy?
Really?
Wow. Everybody, I think to a degree, anybody is going to look in the mirror and see themselves getting fatter or bolder or wrinkled or something like that and think, oh, life's changed me, and maybe what's on the outside doesn't necessarily reflect completely what's on the inside. But I can trace back when I see myself under these headphones. I've got cauliflower ears and my nose is migrated from one side of my face to the other and then got broader. I've got scars and things like that, and of course my teeth being knocked out, and I think, why did I do all this? It's
What's that line in Fight Club when he says, I don't want to die without any scars?
Yeah, that's a big line.
Yeah.
I mean, I look at the scars on me, they're smaller than the ones on you, but I mean, I remember going through something. So for me, it feels kind of good. I mean, do you have a mixed feeling with a lot of that?
Yeah, because some of them came from fights that I won and some came from fights that I lost. Well, actually, the majority of punishment came from training, not from the actual combat itself.
Okay.
I've rarely been hurt seriously in actual bouts. It's almost always been throughout the process of preparation.
Mm-hmm. What does it say on your neck, Pete?
This is my Latin motto for my family, Irving. It's sub soli, sub honor virens. I'm sure that's pronounced terribly, but it's the Latin motto of the Irwin family. My great ancestor was William de Irwin, who was the bodyguard of Robert the Bruce. And the story goes that he when Robert the Bruce was on the lam from Edward Longshanks, okay, he was hiding out in the Highlands, and he had to sleep underneath a holly bush, and William de Irwin stood over him with his sword drawn all night to protect him. So I think that's my ancient history, I think.
Wow, that is intense. Do you think that your tattoos help you sometimes in a fight when guys look across the room, and see you, so across the cage and see you, and as opposed to someone who didn't have any art?
Perhaps I'm not. I mean, I've heard some people say that they find it intimidating, and I suppose it is like warrior imagery that it's all borrowed from. A lot of things are like like the script is gangster tattoo, and the Japanese things are associated with Yakuza and things like that. But really, I think my interest in tattooing and my interest in fighting are not strictly connected. And I sincerely doubt any of the guys that I'm getting in with at this particular level really care. I'm sure the cosmetic things pass them by entirely. I would expect. It does to me at any rate.
Gotcha. Wow, that's interesting. Really interesting. And how many tattoos do you have, and are you getting more?
You get to a point where they sort of blur into one, so I'm not really sure where one begins and the other one ends. So that's But yeah, I'm in a continual process. Am I allowed to say my tattoo is there? Can I give a?
Yeah, go ahead. Bust it out.
I get tattooed at King's Cross Tattoo and Piercing from Rod Medina, who's a very cool Brazilian guy who's crazy about tribal style tattooing and Japanese style tattooing, and he's been giving me some ink over the last year or two.
Wow, that's very cool.
Yeah, good for you, man.
Yeah, I think most people, it's funny, Pete, when I shake your hand, you have one of the most gentle handshakes I've ever shook. And I think a lot of people would be surprised to hear that, although I find that's true with most fighters, is that that they kind of have an easy way about them, whether that translates into a handshake or not. But is that true?
I think some people sort of maybe early in childhood get wrongly informed that you can measure a man by his handshake, and they try to squeeze your hand as if, you know, to give themselves some sort of presence. And for me, in most fighters, you tend to have sore hands, and it's kind of the tools of your trade, and it's a little bit unpleasant to have people squeezing your hand, you know, and you need to object and say, whoa, it's not really how I'm gonna get my measure of you as a person. You know, can you stop assaulting me?
Yeah, I think eye contact's much more powerful anyway.
It's true, yeah, it is. Yeah, now we're locked in it. Yeah. You see, we end up like eye contact.
You know, there's
just holding eye contact or making it.
Tim Ferriss had this exercise in that famous book of his, The 4 Hour Work Week, which was just to hold eye contact with everyone you see for a few weeks, right, and just not look away. And if you practice this experiment, it's astounding how few people can hold your gaze.
But is that a good or a bad thing?
It is what it is. I mean, I personally think maybe it indicates that a lot of people are quite beaten down and submissive, whether it be due to a spouse that breaks their balls all the time, or an angry boss, or I don't know. I always do it. If someone catches my gaze anywhere, I'll hold eye contact till they look away. And maybe like 3 times in 5 years, someone's like confronted me saying like, "What are you looking at?"
So isn't that aggressive, that behavior, a little bit? Remember when you told me you did this, and I was like, isn't that?
Yeah, it could be, but for me, it's kind of...
in the animal kingdom, it is, right?
Man, it's the most fun thing, though, because like you get really uncomfortable when they hold your gaze, and then there's this kind of like electricity, you know, and you think to yourself, don't look away, don't be a pussy, don't look away, you know, and then like, it's quite fun. I enjoy it. I'm sure like you'd be pretty good at it.
Maybe,
You probably have to be quite careful about what areas you're doing this in, you know.
Yeah, but there's a fail-safe. If a guy comes up to you and goes, well, what are you looking at? Then you just say, I'm sorry, you look like a friend of mine, and it always diffuses it.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's
pretty good.
It's a good disclaimer from Pete, though.
Yeah. I met somebody the other day, Sophie Cox, who fights for the British judo team.
Oh, yeah, you told me about that.
Yeah. And when I met her, she had really strong eye contact.
Seriously?
You know, like she's obviously like a real serious competitor, like at the height of her powers right now with the Olympics and stuff like that. And with a guy, you tend to, you can ascertain certain things, you know, whether they're like an alpha male kind of guy, and you need to decide whether you're going to be in a conflict with them, or in or make some sort of accord, or whether you're going to be socially dominant or whatever like that. And it's, I mean, eye contact, I think you can exaggerate what the value of it, but it's a good beginning marker. And I didn't know quite how to react, because she was really strong, and then actually absolutely a lovely person, and we had a nice conversation and talked about judo and things like that. But I didn't know quite how to react there. I thought, because I'm used to it with guys.
Were you thinking about dropping her with the right hand?
I thought she was going to drop me. I thought, okay, but it was interesting. The gender dynamic affects what eye contact is about.
Well, I mean, in the attraction models in sociosexuality, what they say is if a woman catches your eye contact, if she looks down and then looks back up, it means she's ready to be seduced or ready to be approached. And I find that quite interesting. I mean, I don't know if it works the same if a guy catches your eye contact.
So I was thinking about fighting. A lot of stock gets put into the stare down. You know, when two fighters meet in the middle of a ring, and guys like Wanderlei Silva were really famous for the really intense stare downs. And he would win a lot of fights just on pure intimidation. You know, and then it becomes like a self-fulfilling prophecy after that. You know, the Tyson effect, and then Fedor, you know, with his ice cold glare and things like that. You know, and I did try to understand that a lot and think a lot about that, and I always made calm eye contact, you know, with my opponent before the fights.
It's interesting. It's something I've always been interested in as well, within a fighting context as well.
Yeah, it is very interesting, but I've had mixed results. You know, there was a guy who just looked at the floor and looked away from me and looked at the referee, and I thought, man, I've got this guy. This guy's going down. He kicked my ass. It was really bad. And I was completely wrong, you know. But then sometimes I've been right, you know. And it's not an exact science. Yeah. But I think you can say that about a lot of things in combat.
You know, there's something I heard about fighting. You guys obviously know Rickson Gracie. For our listeners who aren't familiar with him, he's supposed to be the best jiu-jitsu fighter who ever lived, and he claims to have a fight record of 400-0. And someone said on a forum, one of the rebuttals to this was that fighting is too unpredictable. There's no way anyone, no matter how good they were, could ever get to a record that high. And I thought that made a lot of sense. There's just too much that can happen. What are your thoughts on that, Pete?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it depends what kind of fighting that we're talking about. But especially with MMA fighting or real no rules fighting, there really are too many variables. And over any given period of time, you sooner or later you're going to lose. And the only way that you can not is really by avoiding the best competition out there. You look at all the best guys now, and even St. Pierre and even Anderson Silva have had losses in their careers, and that's normal.
Is there a point where you're going to say enough is enough?
Yeah. I mean, I consider it.
How old are you now,
all the
Pete?
time. Now I'm 31, which is about 30 is about the mark when athletes. It's not clear cut. There's not a definitive lifespan, and it depends on your weight class and things like that. But you do go through a constant process of analysis, and everybody I know, especially people from my era who are starting to retire or they're considering it, you have to stop and think, why am I doing this, and is it really worth it? Is it have I already got as much out of it as I can? Or,
Why are you doing it?
Good question. It's something I consider a lot. It's not for money. I'm sure I could make more money doing something much easier. But it helps. There's the pride aspect. Where it's good to win fights. It's a good feeling. It's a high to participate in combat. But yeah, it's the reasons why I started doing it and the reasons why I continue to do it are not the same. And sometimes I think I just continue to take fights because that's my job. I do that in the same way that guys who do whatever, who sell computers, grow up and
The only problem is that the lifespan of that is so much more finite than a guy who sells computers or works in a pharmacy, because your body can only take so much,
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, I think it's sad to see fighters go past their prime, and you do see it a lot. Guys, they just can't give it up. In MMA, Sakuraba, I think, is the biggest case of
He
that.
was so good back in the day. He was so good,
Just
and then
keeps fighting, doesn't he? Yeah, it keeps going and going.
crazy.
The problem is with Sakuraba that his period in the sport where he's been a shadow of himself has now gone on longer than the period where he was incredible, and now he's going to go down in history being remembered as that guy that got beat up really badly again and again, rather than being the incredible athlete that he was.
You said that, and I was trying to remember his good days, and then I just remembered him tapping out, Renzo Gracie, or breaking his arm. But yeah, you're right. All I remember is these later fights he's taking where you're like, what? His knees are all busted up and he's taped up and everything. So
He's a warrior at the end of the day, right?
He's a
We've got to have
warrior.
respect for him.
Pete, can you tell us how you got into fighting? Was there one day where you're like, this is the way I want to go in my life? Did you start off fighting all your life, or were you a different story?
No,
So
I
many
was.
stories.
I was an absolutely different type of person. I wasn't confrontational at all. I was arty and sort of hypersensitive to criticism and not competitive at all. And but I was a punk rocker, and I just kept getting beat up on the street.
For real?
Yeah.
Dudes just come up to you and pick fights?
Yeah. I mean, even now I try to look back and I think, man, that was really bad. It wasn't a nice way to live. I'm not really sure why I put myself through it, actually.
And this was in London?
No, this was when I lived in Newcastle.
Okay.
What were you
It's
wearing?
a rough place,
Yeah.
though, huh?
What were you wearing?
Yeah.
The mohawk?
I had a big Mohican. Yeah, I had like a foot tall mohawk and studded leather jacket and all these kind of things. And I mean, Newcastle's an incredible place. Don't get me wrong. It's got a lot of great things going for it and a lot of fantastic people. It's also got it's quite a conformist place, and if you stick your head out above the crowd here in London, it's nothing. You see people dressed everywhere, people from all over the world, people from every possible subculture, and you don't really bat an eyelid. But it's uncommon there, and I think perhaps it's a northern thing too, that when you stick your head above the crowd, people want to beat you back down. And so that was I had some bad reactions there, and so I was getting into fights, and and I wasn't coming off terribly well, and I thought I really need to rectify this. It's
How old were you when this was taking place?
I was, I guess, like sort of 18, 19, around that time. So I just started doing some training. I wasn't really aware of what mixed martial arts or K1 or Thai boxing or anything like that was. Only vaguely, because it just really wasn't the popular entity that it is now. I mean, even now, it's still essentially quite a marginal sport. But
do you feel, this is a thought that I have a lot, that it's kind of like, because if you started when you were 18 or 19, it's pretty much the same age I started training, and back then, like jiu-jitsu and stuff like that, no one knew what it was, right?
Yeah,
it was like for me to learn something in South Africa, I'd have to like get like a video that had been like taped over 3 or 4 times, like and handed down through a whole bunch of buddies, and now, like, to me, it was underground and was kind of cool and edgy back then, and it feels like it's lost something now when you see every Muppet walking down the street with a tap out T-shirt on. Do you know what I mean?
That's true. Yeah, it was a great era, and it's impossible to go back and recapture it, and I wouldn't if I could. But there was something really special about it, and there was that Fight Club kind of thing, where if you saw somebody wearing a tap out shirt, you'd be like, yeah, this guy trains, okay, But now it's there's a greater chance that if somebody's wearing MMA gear, they probably don't fight, and they probably they probably watch UFC, and that's the thing, So it's but it was nice, and it kind of it did make you feel like you were doing something that was out there, and maybe now I look back and think, actually, it's just a sport like any other sport, and is it really as special as I thought? Well, perhaps in a way, yeah.
Do you feel like a performer when you go out there? I was just kind of thinking of like Gladiator, and I've never competed like that, but I just wondered when you go out there and you're thinking, all these people, I'm entertaining them, and they're really getting excited about what I'm doing out there. I mean,
there's an element to that, and I think some people really enjoy that, and some people do get involved in fighting and mixed martial arts specifically for that, because people create characters for themselves, and some more internally and some more overtly. They have the personas in almost pro wrestling kind of style. So you are a performer, but I don't know if I really particularly enjoy that aspect of it.
I'm guessing you try not to let like the crowd's opinion of what you're doing affect what you're actually doing.
I don't know. If I get booed, it doesn't really upset me too much. But on the other hand, I just fought at home for the first time in a couple of years a few weeks ago, and it was great. I had so much support, and the place really erupted for me, and I really think it helped me fight better. So that was great. And then when you feel that effect that you have on people, that you lift everybody, we're in the midst of at the end of the Olympics now, and everybody's thinking about that sporting ideal and how it brings people together, and in a much smaller way. When I went home and fought for everybody, that it did do that, and that was a great feeling. That was really pretty special.
Fair enough.
It's true. I mean, now that the Olympics are over, I'm really feeling that kind of hangover from all the. I mean, like London. If you haven't lived here, England can be a bit of a. What's the right word? Not nihilistic, but people can kind of be like, oh, we're not that excited about this. But everyone was so pumped up, and the city was so supportive. And every day in the news, it wasn't about banking or about this. It was about the British athletes and all these great things that London was doing. Such a good vibe to be part of, right?
It was. I'm still a little bit cynical about the whole the commercial aspect of it, and So I'm not sure. It curbed my appreciation.
Yeah,
for
I'm the
it.
same, Pete.
That's nothing to do with the athletes and the sports that were going on. But I did feel a little bit.
When you attended, or just the whole thing was McDonald's and Coca-Cola behind?
Yeah, actually, when I attended, it was great.
Okay.
It was the peripheral stuff that I really felt was it was hard. It was hard to bear.
I didn't feel any of the ads because I watch everything on BBC Player, and I didn't see a single ad. So I just kind of saw the purity of it all and that kind of thing. So, you were talking about the stare down earlier, Pete, and how you had mixed results, and you weren't a big believer of that. Do you find that you have to get angry or get personal with your opponent over your 10 years of fighting or more to get in there and do a better job or a worse job, or how do you?
Yeah, I
How do
mean,
you
well,
approach that?
well, some people do. I think probably people that aren't familiar with it don't participate in any kind of fighting sports. They probably assume that they probably couldn't imagine themselves striking anybody or hurting anybody for any other reason than anger, or perhaps in self-defense. But it personalizing it has never helped me to perform. I know some people do. You know, they engineer personal grudges and talk trash and act cocky, but it's just never really helped me.
Because your emotions cloud your judgment when you're fighting, right?
I think so. Yeah. It's just I don't feel any particular animosity towards the people that I fight, and I don't think that makes me fight any worse. I think some people need it and some people don't. But knowing knowing yourself as an athlete, you have to figure out what the right way to approach it is.
And on the same side, do you feel any empathy towards your opponents?
Yeah, not at the time. I think it's pretty important to compartmentalize that, to get into character and be able to do the job. Afterwards, I certainly do, and if I've ever hurt anybody, I haven't felt good about it afterwards. And also, really, the physical is not the problem. There's probably another thing that the people who don't fight perhaps don't understand, that the physical pain is really nothing, and it's the emotional pain. And you know that you feel great about your victory and it's taken your life forward and your career forward, but you know that you've set somebody else back, and somebody who's probably, somebody who's just like me, probably lives a very similar life and trains just as hard and has the same hopes, and then you take that away from them. That's not a good thing. You have to accept that. That's the price.
In a strange way, these are the guy across the cage of the ring from you is more like you than probably anyone else in your life, right?
Yeah, it's very true. You have shared experiences that, and the combat itself. When you fight with somebody, especially mixed martial arts fighting or jiu-jitsu, it's a very intimate kind of fighting. It's not even boxing is it's very British. It's very arm's length. When you're grappling with somebody, especially in MMA, when there's no shirts on and you're very up close, you can smell that guy, and you can read what it says on his tattoos. You can read his kid's name on his tattoos.
And at the end of the match, you know him like very few people know him.
Yeah, in a very specific way, a very specific part of him. But yeah, you really do, and you share something that's a very significant moment in both of your lives, probably. Yeah. And you see it a lot. When guys finish fighting, even guys who've talked a lot before the bout, and maybe said things that are a little bit even outrageous, but then they'll hug each other. And the guy who's dropped the other guy or choked the other guy is going to pick him up, or you see somebody who's hurt and the guy anxiously waits over them to see if they're okay. It's very, very common.
Fighters are just better people, I think. They're just better people.
That's a strong statement.
I don't think it's... just think about it. I mean, I
agree.
They are just better. Like, there's a book I read called, by Sam Sheridan, A Fighter's Heart.
Yeah.
And I'm paraphrasing, but he said something about like the thing that struck him most after hanging out with all these guys. Like, he hung out with Nogueira and a couple of pro boxers, and he said they just radiated goodness, and like this sense of calmness and well-being. And I think it's because they've gone through the fire, right? They've become the steel, and they've seen. I mean, they know their own vulnerabilities. They know how fragile they are, and they've accepted that, and they have integrated into the way they move through the world. You
agree with that?
It's a strong statement to say that fighters are better people, because I know some fighters who are bad guys. But yeah, it does provide an opportunity to explore some of the better parts of your nature, and an opportunity to explore the worst parts of your nature too, and to exercise whatever demons or just fulfill that part of you that
Actually, I take that back. I'm going to change it. I'm going to say fighters make better men. Because I guess there's a bunch of like people, like women especially, working in hospices, like helping the terminally ill and cleaning up vomit and shit and all that kind of stuff, who probably go through way more than a fighter ever goes through. So I have to retract that statement, and I'll change it. Fighters make better men.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah, I understand what you meant. I'm taking it from a man's point of view as well, because there are a lot of incredible women fighters out there now,
What's your thought on that? What are your thoughts on that?
Historically, I was quite scared, and because the quality of the fights was not good. Women's MMA was a little bit behind what men's MMA is, and some of the fights were poor quality, and some of the women weren't athletically prepared enough for this style of combat, and the fights were disappointing. And I think you shouldn't really be patting people on the back just because they're girls getting in there and doing it. When I see good women's fights, then I'm all for it. And when I see women who are technically and physically prepared, I'm all for it. I coach some women, and I have friends who are female. That's it. It's like that thing, isn't it? I'm not against it. I've got friends who are women fighters.
Some of my best friends are gay, black, whatever.
Yeah. It's but I just like to see good fights. Whether I really understand it, I'm not sure. I'm not sure what part of a woman's nature drives them to compete in this format.
Me neither.
I understand quite well what drives a man to do it, or the various drives that a man has to do it. And it is a definite path to becoming a better man. And then you start to ask questions about what it means to be a man, how you judge the value of a man.
I used to.
How do you judge the value of a man?
There's a lot of classic traits. I think one of the things that men are historically judged on is the willingness to risk themselves, or the willingness to die, even historically. I think the risks of death in mixed martial arts fighting are very, very limited, and to the extent where if you're worried about that, you should be more worried about getting into a car or crossing a road. The statistics are very, very good, and nobody's died in sanctioned bouts in a long time. The instances have been very, very rare. So it's not something that really concerns me, but the experience is there, and I think it allows you to toy with what it means to be very alive and what it means to come close to death. And I felt at times that the winning and losing has meant so much to me that to tap was to die in a figurative sense. But if the guy would not let go, if there wasn't the situation that were created, with referees and judges and the understanding between me and the opponent, that would have been it. I would have been killed. Of course, we've got that framework there which allows us to experiment with that, to push things to that edge and then safely bring it back. But I think I now know a little bit more what it's going to feel like in those final moments, perhaps. Historically, men have been the gender that sacrifice themselves on the battlefield or whatever, and we're very, very fortunate that we live in this part of the world in these modern times, and we don't have day-to-day fears about living and dying to the same extent that we
are. Are we fortunate or are we
deprived?
Unfortunate? Yeah.
Well, that's my next point. We are deprived of some of those things, and and there's some people like me that probably would have been a lot more successful in times gone by, where the traits that we've got would have been very, very useful, and now they're marginalized.
What's that black and white movie, Sin City, where they're talking about the Mickey Rourke character, and the voiceover says, in another time he would have been a god, but in this time he just didn't fit in. He was just this big thug, right? Yeah.
So some of the qualities that make a good fighter are not good for a lot of other things, and there's good reasons why we've evolved to have those.
What, like selfishness?
That's true. I was more thinking about self-sacrifice, but I guess the two go hand in hand with preparation. But the qualities that can make a great fighter are not useful in the same way that they were in the past. Of course, we still have conflicts, but not the same threats that we faced in a sort of tribal situation. And so people are left with a lot of things in the primitive mind, a lot of drives that don't really have an outlet, and unless we create a sporting one, that because we don't have conflict, then we need competition. And I don't know, for me, playing football or playing basketball or something like that isn't quite enough. I think I need a violent outlet to feel good, and then continue to be a good person in the rest of my life. It is heavily compartmentalized. I'm not a violent person in the rest of my life, but I think it's because I explore it to a really deep extent and get all the bad things out in a very acceptable way.
What was the best MMA match you've ever seen?
Best one I've ever seen. Live.
Well, not necessarily live on UFC or whatever.
My teacher Crezio, was I really admired. That's why I chose to study under him. He fought a few incredible fights, but he fought against this guy, Alan Carvalho, who was 93 kilos, a young guy, and Crezio was a little bit older, and he was out of shape. But he took this fight on short notice because he needed to pay the bills and had to represent his family, and he fought this guy for 30-minute rounds.
This was in Brazil, right?
Yeah, in Brazil. This was in the era of no gloves, of no weight classes.
2 30-minute rounds.
Yeah,
30-minute. Okay.
That's it. It was. I mean, it was impossible to fathom the energy that it takes to do that. And Crezio, who's a very small man, beat this much bigger guy for the first half of the fight, and then the guy started to come back, and Crezio just didn't have the energy anymore. But he wouldn't give up, you know. And I think, of all the fights, even though he'd had some incredible victories, he was really, really proud of this fight, and he wears a medallion that features an image of him and this man from another fight.
That's fucking cool, dude.
Seriously,
that is fucking cool. Wow. It's giving me goosebumps, that story, dude.
Wow.
He was an incredible man, you know, and he gave me a lot of inspiration with his stories, and he tried to, you know, as much as he told me some technique about jiu-jitsu, he told me a lot about sports psychology and that real warrior mentality, you know. And he is a guy from that era where people weren't fighting for trophies and for money. They were fighting for honor and fighting for respect and for their lives too.
Some people claim that, you know, that I think they call it gameness.
Yeah.
You know, they claim that, like, you cannot learn it. It's just in you or it isn't. I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, what are your thoughts? Do you see guys that you know are going to be great fighters, or do you see some guys that just surprise you and you can make into great fighters?
There's a big debate, you know, about, you know, where people say, like, you know, fighters are born, not made, and then you'll see another gym with a placard up saying fighters are made, not born. You know, and you can see athletic potential in people, but sometimes it's hugely misleading. You know, you see guys who just take to it and they seem naturals, and you think, wow, this guy's going to be the next UFC champion. And then they get beat once and they don't like it. And they think, I'll go and do something else. Things are too easy for them. And then sometimes the people who really lack athletic ability, you find that they've got mental depths that are hard to fathom, you know, where they'd be willing to do anything in preparation and in the ring. You know, just the story about Crezio in this fight. Crezio was getting beaten. He was getting beaten down badly, and his cornerman went to throw the towel in, and his brother said, no. He said, let him die. He said he'd rather die than give up, which was incredible. Fortunately, the referee stopped it, and, you know, still get to have the man now. But that really struck me, that it was that important, you know, that we're really not playing games. I think sometimes now mixed martial arts is a little bit more accessible than it was back in the days of Vale Tudo, and people play it more as a game and more as a sport. But that was the thing that really struck me, and that's why I really wanted to take part in this sport, because it really was a serious business.
There's a thing that I find fascinating, and it's when you get to the point in a match, whether it's a jiu-jitsu match or an MMA match or whatever it is, or in your training, where you want to quit. Like, maybe you're exhausted and you're like huffing, or like your guys got you in a submission, and it's that little window. That's, for me, one of the most interesting aspects of fighting. It's like, what makes you quit and what makes you stay? Do you know what I mean? Like, what is that little essence?
I think a lot of it is habit. You know, you put it into somebody's head that it's important not to quit. You know, they call it like a wrestler's mentality, or, you know, that you just don't give up no matter what. And then when you start getting into that, it becomes a point of pride that you're the guy in the gym who doesn't quit. And then you take it out into the rest of the world with you, and no matter what else is happening, you don't quit. You know, and sometimes it's catching a bus, that you'll keep sprinting and you find you catch that bus. Or it might be something more important, you know, it might be something, you know, something really heavy where you feel like emotionally you're having times where you can't go on and life's not worth living. But the simple lesson is that you don't quit, and you're a guy who doesn't quit out of habit, and you go on through and you survive and you become successful in the rest of your life. And so it's one of the great things about fighting, that it's a little microcosm of everything else that goes on in life, you know, that it's a really sort of distilled, intense experience of everything else. And when you overcome that, the rest of the stuff gets easy and gets a lot more pleasant.
Do you think everyone should fight? I mean, you know, kids, grandmas, men, women,
invalids.
Yeah. Do you?
No, I don't think it's for everybody. I think I think all men should practice combat. I think they should practice fighting. It's a skill that's very empowering, the ability to do it. There are a lot of people who get involved and they only ever intend to have maybe one fight or two fights, or they might become more enamored with jiu-jitsu or judo or something like that, which is not to underestimate what it takes to compete at that sport. But it's not necessarily as intense. You can compete at a lower level and not get badly hurt or go through really terrible fear. But it is something everybody should do.
I think everyone should train jiu-jitsu. I've never met a single person that I've met that I wouldn't think your life would be better if you rolled some jiu-jitsu once a week.
Yeah. It's definitely it's a great thing, and it's physically it's beneficial for everybody. The practice of mixed martial arts as a career is not necessarily psychologically or physically good for a person's well-being. It can be very, very bad. It gives you a hugely imbalanced life. It causes you to deny yourself a lot of things, and sometimes it comes at the expense of relationships and jobs. I know a lot of people who've had marriages break down and long-term relationships fall apart, and relationships with their families and close friends become very, very strained.
The same could be said of anything, man. Like a lot of people, that happens through, I don't know, busy execs. Like same thing happens, or people with other esoteric hobbies. It happens, man. It's
true. It's true. I think you can balance it out and still practice mixed martial arts or practice jiu-jitsu in a more balanced way that gives that improves your life, rather than running the risk of what do I say? What am I trying to say? Making your life worse. But yeah, it's my teacher. He gave me a book. It was a fictional account of Genghis Khan's life story, and there's a little passage where Genghis does something that's more courageous than his brothers are willing to dare, and he says something like. Courage isn't something to be saved up and spent at the appropriate moments. It's a muscle to be trained and made stronger. It's a blade to be kept sharp. And it's true. You as a like we were talking about the qualities of a man. I think being courageous and being willing to sacrifice yourself is one of the strong qualities of a man. And you have to continually practice that. You have to make yourself available for competition to prove that.
Wow. That's heavy stuff. Definitely. You have the tattoo jiu-jitsu on your stomach. Is that right?
Yeah, I've got the kanji, the Japanese telling of it on my forearm, and then I've got written large across my stomach. And then I make everybody who trains with me get jiu-jitsu tattoo on them as well.
Where's yours going to be, Brian?
Mine's pending.
Brian, have you had your alpha brain today?
I've actually had one this morning. Yes.
You did, huh?
We should talk about our sponsor. Correct?
Can I take one?
Yeah, you can.
Do you want one, Pete?
Sure. What is it?
Just make sure.
I said yes before I even know what it is.
It'll make you a better fighter, man.
Okay.
We are sponsored by Onnit Labs, and they produce Alpha Brain and Shroom Tech Sport, and it's basically a nootropic, so it's basically nutrients that make your brain work better. There's no caffeine in there, and a lot of these things have been used over time, but this is like a special recipe.
Should have taken this before the interview began.
It couldn't got much better than it has already. So, anyways,
just on another note,
let me just finish up with a promotion code and stuff. So if you go to onnit.com, that's ONNIT.com, and type in London Real, you can get 10% off. Alpha Brain, and then Shroom Tech has the cordyceps mushroom, which both Nick and I like a lot when we train, especially heavy cardio and stuff.
And Onnit Labs is actually owned by a good friend of ours, Aubrey Marcus, who has a blog and a podcast called The Warrior Poet, which is really, really cool. It discusses a bunch of some of the themes that we tackle on our show. Yeah, you can get there by going to warriorpoet.us. Highly recommend you check that out.
Yeah, big shout out to Aubrey. He's the reason that pretty much we did our ayahuasca experience, and I'm just coming back from mine from a week ago, and I finally understood some of the things that Aubrey was talking about down in when he went down to South America. So props to him, and a big shout out. For people that don't know what jiu-jitsu is, can you kind of give a layman's description and then just talk about your time in Brazil and also I know you spent some time with Anderson Silva down there. I was wondering if you could just talk about that.
Yeah, Brazilian jiu-jitsu is not that doesn't involve striking. It's all joint locks and pins, submission holds, holds that are designed to make somebody give up or incapacitate them, and it favors leverage over brute force, and the efficient use of force. So it was developed by the Gracie family in Brazil when judo was imported when jiu-jitsu and judo in Japan started to amalgamate, and people went around the world and started to pass it on, and the Brazilian form took a very different tack to the Japanese form, which became the sport of Olympic judo that we know now, and the Brazilians favored the ground grappling aspect a lot more. So I went to Brazil to learn this. The story of Brazilian jiu-jitsu and mixed martial arts as we know it today are quite well combined. It began with challenge matches between various martial arts, and now of course we have mixed martial arts, which is a competition format rather than an art in itself. But Brazilian jiu-jitsu is a specific art, and that's what I went to Brazil to learn with Cresio, who I talked about before. But I was fortunate when I got there as well. I got to spend a couple of days there at the Minotauro gym, and I did some sparring with Anderson Silva, the world champion. I'm sure anybody who watches what was that like? UFC. Anderson was really really an inspirational character. You know, you can just tell. Even if you'd never seen him fight, I'm sure that there was something about him that they really had that command presence. When he walked in the room, you knew he was somebody. I guess I'm skewed because I've seen the incredible fights that he's given before, but he had a magnetism about it that I couldn't quite explain.
Could you tag him like when you were sparring?
No, this was the thing. He played a little bit when we started warming up, and kind of called me on and said, throw a couple of punches, and let me tag him. And I was pretty careful not to hit too hard because I thought he's going to clean me out if I try it on here. He said, okay, let's go. And the guy was just amazing. He was doing like capoeira footwork 1 minute, then the alley shuffle, and tagging me with different things. And he did this incredible spinning elbow. He did a bit of capoeira footwork, spun around and put his elbow just underneath my jaw, lightning speed, and then just stopped right here and just winked at me.
Fucking hell. That's unbelievable, bro.
And on one hand it was incredible because you think, man, I'm in the presence of greatness here. On the other hand, you think, this is so depressing because I'm trying so hard and I'm never going to be close to being as good as
I know
this
the
guy.
feeling very well.
It's inspirational and disheartening at the same time. It's a strange experience.
Is that similar to training with Roger in jiu-jitsu?
Yeah.
Okay. It's just okay. Enough said. And how long were you in Brazil for?
I lived there on and off, sort of playing the visa refreshing game. So I think I went there first in 2004, 2003 or 2004, and then I continued to do that until 2006. And then it just became a little bit more difficult. I never intended to stop doing that, but it just got harder, and I ended up getting married and different things like that. And so I ended up more based in here. So I try to get back for a month or so every year. I try to get my teacher to come over here for a month. But it was an incredible time, incredible place.
What was your best career moment, if you think about it, or was there a specific moment, or will there be a specific moment in the future?
It's a funny one because the goalposts constantly change. It's one of the cruel things about mixed martial arts that it's incredibly hard to win and incredibly easy to lose. But maybe it's just me, and maybe it's a failing on my part that it's hard to get over losses and to stay with you for a long time. But wins are very short-lived. The pleasure comes and goes in moments and then in days, and then you have to get back and do it again. You have to prove yourself again and try to recapture that feeling. So I think I would have been very, very satisfied if you told me 10 years ago that I was gonna achieve the things that I have now. And now it's I just look at all the things that I didn't do, and it's not that satisfying. But the great times. A friend of mine, he gave me a book, a compilation of photos. My friend Howell from. Can I say his website?
Yeah, go for it.
BJJHacks.com. If you're a jiu-jitsu fan, BJJ Hacks is very, very cool. A lot of content from Brazil, some great stuff there. But he's also a professional photographer, and he made this compilation for me. And there's loads of pictures of me like punching guys and choking guys and stuff like that. And I'm just looking in the background and seeing the people that were in my corner and seeing how happy they were when we won. And I just, you know, I remember those times that united everybody. And just I remember the feeling, you know, the days after where you wake up and you think, oh, I didn't let anybody down, everything went okay. And you can just enjoy everything. You know, it's when you deny yourself, the training process is quite difficult. The 8 weeks or 10 weeks or whatever run up you do, you know, where you can't drink anything, you can't eat anything, you know, and you put yourself through this hardship voluntarily. When it's over, the you know, the taste of everything is so much better, and you know, your senses are heightened. You know, it just creates a platform on which you can experience pleasure in a way that you can't without pain before.
You know what I think about Alpha Man is, like, just think of those dudes in the UFC. Like, think of, I mean, Anderson Silva is probably not a good example because he's married, but like, those dudes who've been like training, like you said, cutting weight, then they go out and perform in front of like 100,000 people. Like that night, they must get laid like fucking rock stars. They must have this
Nick
glow
always
about
brings it
them.
back.
But think about it. I mean, like, am I right though? Just imagine how, like, everything, like you're saying, everything must taste better. You might just glowing with that essence. You know, yeah, he knows what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I wish it did. The girls, they always just look at me and go, yeah,
Too many times.
look bigger on television. You know, I thought you were a heavyweight. You know.
I mean, Chuck Liddell wrote some book. I never read it, but he was talking about all the, you know, women he would
Groupies
have and all that stuff and groupies. But is it not always that? Nick always has to ask about the groupies.
My experience was not that glamorous. I think, yeah, the best after party I ever went to, I went bowling. Really, couldn't get in any nightclubs because my face was all busted up, and the only place I could get in was a bowling alley.
Okay.
Yeah, I fought in the first ever legal MMA show in Belgium. It was a judo show. And the first time they'd ever had professional MMA, and I nearly blew the whole deal by accidentally elbowing the guy, which was illegal. It was, but yeah, so we couldn't get in anywhere. My face was all busted up like this, and I was with Leon Agal, who's a crazy, huge-looking guy. Even if you didn't know he was a world champion jiu-jitsu fighter, you wouldn't think you could put him out of your club, you know. So we just couldn't get in anywhere. So we walked around town all night, and then went and played a game of 10-pin bowling, and it was the best time I ever had in my life.
That's cool, man. That's really cool.
I think when Matt Serra beat GSP, he came home and he ordered a pizza, and there's like a video of him, and he's like, I ordered a pizza. That was like his celebration.
Oh,
you know?
that's fantastic.
I guess a lot of it is so mental. Anyways,
Yeah,
right?
you know, that's kind of what I was saying. You know, that the small things that you take for granted, you can take huge pleasures in, and you know, the things that you're denied, they don't seem significant when there's no reason not to. If you know, most of the time, if you want to eat something, you can eat something. That's the life that we live in this one country, which is a privilege, but at the same time, it's not the experience that human beings have had historically. You know, that we've had to struggle for different things, and so those problems that we do have, you know, first world problems, you know, they can seem hugely significant, and this is another one of the reasons that I enjoy combat so much.
Puts everything in perspective.
It really does, and you know, it's the Fight Club thing, you know, where the guy says, you know, that after fighting everything gets the volume turned down, which is quite true. All the negative things too, you know. This was a statement from a character who was having a negative experience and didn't enjoy his life, and all the things that irritated him just didn't seem to bother him anymore. But then on the flip side, if you have positive experiences in your life, the volume gets turned up on them. It's a nice effect.
You've talked about like Plato before, and how you quoted him before about saying that life was really about pain or denying pain.
Well, there's a proposition in Plato's Republic. So that there is no pleasure, only the cessation of pain. I think most fighters are familiar with the idea, even if they don't know Plato. But yeah, I think without antecedent pain, and trying to find pleasure, you wind up with hedonism, and the experience of denying yourself all of these things and putting yourself through mental and physical hardship to the degree that you do in an MMA fight. Really allows you to experience things in a pure way.
We do these things not because they're easy, but because they're hard, right? That
Quite.
quote from Kennedy, really means a lot to me, that one.
Yeah.
If everything was easy, you would get no satisfaction out of it, right?
So While we're quoting, I think there's a Chekhov quote. It might not be Chekhov. It's probably one of those ones that's like a really famous misquote that somebody put a picture on Facebook. So I'm going to sound like an idiot. It's something like any fool can face a crisis. It's the day to day that grinds you down.
That's power. Brian, maybe you could. You said something to me which blew my mind the other day. We were talking about taking MDMA or ecstasy, and you had some story about Hannibal. Can you relate that again, man?
Hannibal, what was I talking about? Oh, that's what I was talking about.
Yeah, this blows my mind.
I don't know what I was talking. Oh, I was just saying there was a point where Hannibal was defending the Carthage, and he had like gone through all of this struggle like all of his life, and like defended his thing and gone to battle and seen his sons and daughters die, and then he'd finally defended his city from the Romans, and like he had this moment in his life where he was like filled with all of this ecstasy and joy that he had spent 40 years of his life going. And I was just comparing that to someone popping a pill in Brixton, and I'm just saying like, those feelings are meant to be worked for. Those feelings exist in your body because you went through all of that pain and hardship. Word. And I don't know. I was just
that's cool. That is. I read.
What do you think about that?
Yeah.
What do I think about
that?
Yeah, that's the truth as I've experienced it. Everything other than fighting has felt not phony, but unsatisfying. And so sometimes I'm a little bit saddened with myself when I think inevitably everybody at some point starts to consider what else they could have done with their lives. And I look back and I think I could have done anything. I'm not a stupid guy. I could have been a doctor if I'd really wanted. I could have studied anything. I think look all the fields of human endeavor, engineering and science, and I look at all these things and it's not bothered. I feel a certain sense of shame about it. Really, I wish that I could care. I wish that I could be interested enough to study all of these incredible things. And
do you feel that fighters have a tendency to be too hard on themselves?
A lot of the good ones, yeah. Yeah, I think once you start to celebrate things, then you stop progressing.
You would have made a great fighter, Brian.
Man, super hard on myself. We only got a few minutes left, but I just wanted to ask if you could call the 21-year-old Pete Irving on the phone and give him a few minutes of advice. What would it be, and would he take it?
I'd say choose your tattoos better. Get a plan instead of ending up with loads and loads of different ones. But it's one of those things where you have to come to terms with the fact that you can't have regrets, and everything you've done has made you the person that you are, etc., etc. But yeah, I would have done a lot of things differently. I'm sure anybody would. And if you say otherwise, you're probably lying. It sounds nice to say, it's all made me who I am. But no, of course, everybody would rethink a lot of things.
Fair enough. And what do you think of the current state of mixed martial arts and the UFC and everything that's happening now?
I've got mixed feelings about the UFC. On one hand, they've done incredible things promoting the sport and making it what it is and giving it the profile that it has. On the other hand, they've essentially got a monopoly now, having bought out pretty much everything else. So if you're not in the UFC, then you're not you're going to struggle to make a good living. So I've got mixed feelings about them, but I have to say that because I'm not fighting for them. So I'm sure I would change my tune pretty quickly if I was.
And how do people get a hold of you, or what's the best way for them to find you, if you want to be found, that is?
If anybody wants to come and train Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu or mixed martial arts with me, or train Thai boxing, you can get me at Semtex Gym in Swanley, or you can take one-to-ones with me up in King's Cross at Urban King's Gym. But just look me up at Facebook. I've got a Facebook page there, and I'll have like a profile picture. It'll just be going like this.
Pete also has a column in Fighters Only magazine.
Oh yeah,
Do you want to read that?
Yeah, I'm going to be in trouble now. Yeah, I really should have said that.
How long have you been writing for them?
I've been writing for Fighters Only for a lot of years. For maybe, I think, nearly since it began, which was great, because they're a Newcastle-based publication. So
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So that's the secret of why I'm in there. Yeah.
Do you enjoy writing?
Yeah, I love it. It's nice to be able to pass good techniques. I see a lot of columns that are just kind of, here's the basic this and that, and then it's nice to be able to go into a bit more depth. And I think I take a lot of pride in the column that I produce and in the writing that I do there. I wouldn't really describe myself as a journalist in any other respect. I wouldn't write about anything else. I think that's the only thing I really know enough about to put pen to paper.
Don't know until you try. I see a guest blog for London Real in the future. Well, that's fantastic. Thanks so much for the time, Pete. I really appreciate that.
Thank you for having me.
And we're gonna just stop now. We're gonna actually take some viewer questions right after this, but we're hitting our iTunes limit. But if you enjoyed this episode, which I'm sure you did, if you could just share it with your friends, hit the YouTube button or on Facebook, and let people know about us. And until then, right?
It's about the journey.
Cool. Thanks a lot, guys. It's awesome.
Thank you.
Welcome to London. From city we come from. London town and we go. Play the Eden sound now. We go party all night long.
Sun is shining and you know we gonna feel good. Come on everybody, party in the neighborhood. Eden nights, let's check out.